and the Kings beat here on D'Lo and KC. And James, I was just talking about some of the things that me and Jesse were just talking about, some of the things we're excited to see. And we got on the topic of Kevin Herter and whether or not he would start and everything like that. I think him coming off the bench is perfect for both parties. I think Kevin Herter having less on his plate to deal with, being a guy off the bench, like when you're a starter, it's like, all right, I got to make sure I'm making my shots. And then I got to make sure, I'm working the pick and roll the right way. And I got to make sure, I'm also guarding Devin Booker and all this. Like, it's a lot. And I think at this point, he might be best suited to come off the bench, be a guy that spreads the floor, make sure your offense is on point. That's probably more your focal point is your offense. And if you're hitting, we keep you on. If not, we'll try again later. But I think it simplifies things for both parties. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is some like accuracy to what you're saying. I like the idea of Kevin Herter coming off the bench, and I like the idea of Keon Ellis starting. I think like the mental aspect of it, like always being a starter and not being able to adjust. I mean, it's like there's a reality there that we don't know how he's going to handle that if that's in fact what happens. But at the same time, I also like for as much as we sort of talk about this, like I always feel like Kevin Herter gets devalued a little bit here. And it's not that we're intentionally doing it. It's just I think that we all have an opinion. And, I think a lot of our opinions kind of line up that we like the idea of a defensive minded guy in the starting lineup with the other four guys.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't think it's a knock on Kevin Herter as much as it is, like sort of a reality of the situation. He missed major time last year at the end of the season, and it opened the door for somebody to step up and show not just like how good he can be, but what kind of impact he can have on the team and on winning. And so Keon Ellis has kind of like created a little bit of this, and not by talking about it and not by saying he wants to be the starter, he deserves to be the starter, but by going out and doing the things that this team needs. And it's not that Kevin doesn't do the things that this team needs. It's just that Keon is different and he specializes on the defensive end, and this team needs that. I'd also point out it's a really good thing to have like 7 guys who should be starting, and it just is. I mean, this is a really good thing for Mike Brown to have to work out. That you have Malik Monk, who is good enough to be a starter. That you have Kevin Herter, who's good enough to be a starter. Keon Ellis, good enough to be a starter. Like all of these guys are quality players, and the more quality you have, the better depth you have. The more quality of depth that you have, the better you're going to be in the long run. And so I'm intrigued to see how it all plays out. I'm intrigued to see Kevin get back on the floor, but until he does that, we're just kind of left with this, pontificating over it, not sure
Right.
what's going to happen. We have to wait and see what exactly the final decision is and the final product is here when the Kings open up against Minnesota.
Well, to that point though, too, James, like I'm always hesitant to say this kind of stuff because I don't want to put players in a box. But you know, Kevin Herter could start in this league clearly. For a good team. Malik Monk could start clearly for a good team in this league, but they might be best off the bench for this team, and that goes to what you were talking about as far as the talent level. These guys are legit starters. Like they have the talent to start. Their best roles for this team is coming off the bench. And that just means the 5 guys that are starting for you, the roster is legit 8 deep, like of guys that you think could probably start in this league, right? Like I think he has started. I don't know if it was a good team, but Trey Lyles has started in this league. He
Yep.
started, for the Pistons and the Spurs, I think, and was a solid player, like 10 points per game, 6, 7 rebounds. Like he wasn't bad at all. So he could start too. But you got now 3 guys coming off the bench that are capable starters. I mean, that just adds to the depth, man. That, like you said, that's a great sign.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And the other thing I would point out too is like, look, for as much as we like, again, you and I, Kenny, as much as we have talked about the idea of Keon Ellis, like we have to remember that one of the major questions about this team is whether Domantas Sabonis and DeMar DeRozan, what that's going to do to the spacing on the floor, what that's going to do to sort of the ability to move the ball in the system. And like, there's no question that Kevin Herter's like movement off ball and that his play style might lend itself to being the best offensive fit for this team with the starting unit.
Mhm.
And like, so I'm not willing to say that this is just Keon Ellis's job to lose or anything like that.
Right.
Um, I definitely understand what Kevin brings to the floor and what he brings to a lineup that has DeRozan and Sabonis. And what you want is not just an elite 3-point shooter that shoots 3 or 4 threes a game, but an elite 3-point shooter in the past who can shoot 6 or 7 threes a game and who draws a crowd every single time he comes off a screen.
Mm.
And so that has value to it. And so again, like, this is a really, really difficult situation to be in if you're Mike, but it's also a good situation. Like,
Yeah.
this is what coaching is about. This is what coaching high level players and expensive players, guys who make lots of money. This is what it's about. You've got to make the tough decisions, and you have to do what's best for everybody.
Yeah.
And that goes for Kevin, that goes for Keon, but it goes for the other, 8 guys, 7 guys that might be in the rotation. You have to do what's best for the collective and put your team in the best situation to win. And so we're going to see what he thinks is the best situation to win. And we can continue to question that all year long.
Mhm.
It's just going to depend. If they're winning, then it'll quiet everything and we won't even hear about this.
Right.
If they're not winning and they have to make changes, this thing could come up, 2 or 3 times during this season.
Yeah. No. And so the thing about it is, this will be the third time that I've brought him up in the week, but Mike Brown um, has a situation where he's got to figure out who to play, and he's got these tough decisions to make. I think poor Luke Walton would trade places with him any day. We were we were talking about Luke's tenure the other day, and we were kind of going through it, and we're like, are there only like 3 guys still in the league that he coached? This was like 3 years ago. It's like Fox, Buddy Hield, who was
Well,
the other one?
Marvin
Wilson.
still, yeah.
Marvin's hanging on by a thread. He's hanging on by a
Is
thread.
Corey Joseph out of the league?
That's tough.
No,
We'd
I,
have
I
to
think
check the waiver wire.
I think Kojo's in the league. Yeah, I mean that's
But think about, like, he had those 3 guys, and everybody else is hanging on by a thread.
yeah, bogey. Yeah, it's one
Bogey,
of those
thanks.
things that I talked about, like how we look at a coach's legacy or how we look at player legacies and stuff like that. I will still contend, a lot of people like don't like Luke Walton as a head coach and all that stuff. I'll just contend, like, look at the team he had in his first year. Look at the team he had his second year. Look at the pandemic. Look at how
Mm,
many other coaches lost their jobs. I mean, Frank Vogel won a championship in the bubble and then got fired the next year. I mean, it was a weird time, but at the same time, like, he loses Bogdanovich, he loses Alex Len and Kent Bazemore, and they
mm,
replaced all of those 3 people with a rookie Tyrese Halliburton, with a with what's his name, Hassan Whiteside, and
mm,
with Glenn Robinson the third. Like, he
mm.
didn't have the players. And then if you look at that season specifically, that's the year that they tell Nemanja Bjelica, "Hey, look, you're not going to be the starter anymore," and then he doesn't want to play there anymore. And
Right.
so you're down to like 5 NBA players maybe on that roster, and he's got to go into a season and try to win games. And like, there aren't many coaches that were going to win games in that situation.
That was tough, man. But Mike Brown, it is an issue, what Mike Brown is dealing with now, but it's just an issue that I'd rather have than the other issue.
Oh no, I would definitely rather have the issue that Mike Brown has, and then and I think also, like, look, Mike's not going to have to deal with a lot of this. Like, injuries I have kind of like taken the wind out of any like controversy, out of any like position battle, like,
Mhm.
completely. So he's gonna have to figure out who's healthy on day one, and how a guy like Jordan McLaughlin, who hasn't played who hasn't ever worked with this team, how he's going to fit into the puzzle. And
Yeah.
guys like, like Kevin Herter, but also Trey Lyles, like when is Trey going to be back? Is he going to be back before the season starts? We don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. So, James, you mentioned something about like the shooting and spreading the floor and stuff like that. And I think you were talking about Kevin Herter, and you said, maybe he's a guy that shoots, if he's starting or and he's in the rotation consistently, shoots like 7 threes a game or something like that. Earlier, I talked about Keegan Murray, and I was trying to figure out how many shots a game he might take this year. And I know when Malik Monk was out, I was asking him, Kyle Manson was asking him, you need 18 shot attempts a night. That's what you need to do. He doesn't need to do that now with a healthy team with DeRozan here. I think if he lived in that 11, 12 attempts a night range, he'd be good. But I was also thinking like the threes. Like if he's 11 shot attempts a night, we're looking at like 6, 7 threes a night from him.
Yeah, last season he averaged 6.3. I mean 6.6. His rookie season he averaged 6.3 threes per game. I'd like to see that closer to 8, to be honest with you. And I think he's a guy that I want to see taking 12, 13 shots a game. But like we're gonna keep going through this. Like how many guys can you have? I mean, DeRozan shot 17 times per game last season. Sabonis is at 12 shots per game, and now Mike wants him taking an extra 2 to 4 3-pointers a game. We start to run out of shots pretty quickly when you start to really look at all of this. And the one guy I don't want losing shots is Keegan. I think that in the right situation, in the right frame of mind, and I think he will be this season. Um, he's a guy who easily can shoot 40% from 3. And because of his size, we're talking about a 6'8" guy who shoots taller than that, if that makes sense. I think he's a guy that like I need more from him still in order for him to take this next step in his development. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. Again, I don't expect DeMar DeRozan to take 15 shots per game. I mean, to take 17 shots per game. I think it's more like 14, 15. But that's up from like the 8.6 shots per game that Harrison Barnes took at that same position last year. So where are these extra shots coming from? Number one, it can come from better pace and you can create more shots by speeding up the pace of the game. It can come from offensive rebounds and crashing the glass, which is something that's been the talk of camp. If you can get 3 more possessions per game on the offensive side of the ball, that's 3 more shots for these guys to take. So I think there are ways to create extra shots. But at the end of the day, like these shots have to come from somewhere, right? And so it's going to be probably the biggest like intrigue that you have for this team this season is how do you balance it out? And I look at it a little bit like the 49ers offense. Like, one night it's Juwan Jennings catching 150 yards. Next night it's Brandon Ayuk, and then there's Kittle catching for 100 yards. There's Debo catching for 120 yards. That's not even with McCaffrey in the game. So like you're constantly trying to figure out who's going to be the hot hand that day. And in the NBA, it's a little bit different. But like the Kings need 3 or 4 hot hands every single night. And so there's going to be opportunity here for these guys to score, and they're just going to have to figure out how to help each other out, how to feed each other. And I think that's kind of a good problem to have. Again, I'd rather have that than only having like 2 scorers and wondering where the points are coming from when one of those guys gets injured. But this is definitely, again, it's going to be part of the coaching problem that Mike has this year.
Yeah, and that's we talk about all the reports about the pace going up and all this other stuff, and it's twofold, right? Like part of it is we're talking about they're trying to get back to the Beam Team 1 days and all this other stuff. The other part, which may be true, but the other part of it could be like you just broke down, and we got to find some more shots. We got some great offensive weapons now. We got to find some more shots. So we need to get out and transition. We need to get on the offensive boards. And like you said, between those two, like if you pick up the pace and you get on the offensive boards, you might be able to find 5 more shots, in a game, 5 to 7 more shots in a game. because you were able to get on the offensive board. Maybe that's getting somebody to the foul line a little bit or something like that. But that could be the reason, and probably is the reason for the emphasis on how they play offense a little bit. They got to find some shots for these guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've got to get creative, and I like the idea that they're gonna try to go after, the offensive glass. To me, again, we talked to Mike about it the last couple of days, and it's something they're really pushing. It is a point of emphasis in camp that whoever steps on the court, if you're on, if you're below the break, you're those corner spots, your job is to fly into the middle and crash the glass every single time. And they think that they can slow the opposing offense down just by like kind of clogging the lane and getting in the way and deflections and then getting some offensive rebounds. But I really look at the way that the Knicks have always beat up on the Kings. And whether they win or lose, the way the Knicks out rebound the Kings has always been like startling. And a lot of that is because Josh Hart's one of like the best rebounding guards that we've seen in a long time. And I even think that that's part of the reason why the Kings circled Devin Carter in the draft, because Devin Carter is by far the best rebounding guard in this draft. And, he's a guy that probably can average 5 rebounds a game at the pro level, who averaged 8 rebounds a game, in a college. So I kind of like this idea of what they're doing, but it's just another mechanism to get more efficient shots, to get the spray three, to get open looks for guys, to get more opportunity for all these guys, and I think everyone's going to be motivated, right?
Yeah.
If it's a freewheeling offense, but also if you're allowed to go chase offensive rebounds and again try to get offensive rebounds that lead to easy buckets for you and your teammates, man, if you're a hungry offensive player, like this should be a fun offense to play in, and a fun defense to play in as well. If that's going to be the case, if it's really going to be up tempo and chasing offensive rebounds the whole time.
James, we were talking earlier with Tristy Rodriguez of NBC Sports Bay Area, and we were talking about some of the things that we're looking forward to. Obviously, tonight everybody's looking forward to DeMar DeRozan. We want to see him in that Kings uniform and what that looks like. But she brought up a player that I think I've heard you talk about as well, and I kind of forgot about. And I do want to see what this guy's looking like, and that's Jaylen McDaniels. It seems like he may be one of these guys that Mike Brown, from time to time, whether he's a head coach or an assistant coach, takes on as a little bit of a project and sees something in this guy, physically, like, hey, he's, 6'8", 6'9", he's athletic, he's strong, he's quick or whatever. I think with my teaching, I could turn him into this type of player or this type of defender or something like that. And I'm anxious to see if that's the way he's looking at Jaylen McDaniels and what he sees for him and how much he's going to play, how much opportunity he's going to get, because the idea of a 6'8", 6'9" guy that's athletic, can move, all this other stuff, can jump, that seems like exactly what the Kings are needing. But we haven't seen it on the NBA level production-wise from him. So we don't know if he's even capable of it. But in theory, that's exactly what they're looking for. And I wonder the opportunity he may get tonight and in the preseason to show what he can do.
Yeah, I think tonight preseason he's going to get a lot of opportunity just because. I mean, let's be honest. It's like the starters and then Malik Monk and Alex Len and Jalen McDaniels that are healthy, for what could be like a second team. And then it's going to be kind of a free for all. This is a type of player the Kings have had the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. It's a player that clearly Monte McNair knows that he needs. So it's why we've seen Mo Harkless. It's why we saw KZ Okpala. It's why we saw Kessler Edwards. Like, these are all the same style of players. And I would say that of the group, clearly Mo Harkless had 1 or 2 seasons early in his career where he was more of a scorer and got a lot of opportunity on that end. But McDaniel is one of those guys who, there's a time where he averaged 10 points a game for Charlotte. Now it's a really bad team, and he was getting all kinds of opportunity, and he wasn't very efficient. But that doesn't change the fact that he was actually a ball player. He averaged 1.2 steals per game. He was active. He brought a lot to the table before he got traded to Philadelphia. he also had a really bad experience last year in Toronto where like he just couldn't figure out a way to crack the rotation and his scoring was way down. He shot 34% from the field. He only hit 17% from three. Just really, really struggled to find his way and to get in, to break through and to get, honest minutes. He's
Mhm,
looking for like a much better situation here and wants to kind of rinse that out of who he was as a player.
mhm,
But you got to do it, right? And like I think that in the grand scheme of things, the idea of him is like a really, really good idea. You need these long, athletic guys who can defend the two, the three, the four, and kind of move from one position to next. Positionless basketball players. It's just he has to show that he can hit the open three and that he can defend at the highest level and he can be a player that defenses stay honest on.
mhm,
Because if you can't prove that, then again, the defense shrinks and it really messes with spacing. And we end up having the same situation like a Kessler Edwards had or KZ or any of the other guys that they've had at that position where it doesn't really work because you can't play on the offensive end.
mhm,
But I would also point out that I think people forget that Mo Harkless played here. I don't know, was that 3 or 4 years ago? And when Mo Harkless started, the Kings were something ridiculous, like 20-8 or something. Like that type of player is very valuable if you can get them in the right headspace and you can get them hitting their 3-point shots and really like in the right frame of mind.
mhm.
Um, Maybe Mo Harkless is a little bit better defender than McDaniels, but either way, the idea of him is really a good thing. He needs to go out and prove that, when he gets his opportunities, that he can be productive and part of a good basketball team.
Yeah, and thinking about Jaylen McDaniels being here, it kind of throws a monkey wrench in my theory of potentially my theory of Kevin Herter playing the small forward, the backup small forward role, because if Jalen, is doing what the Kings hope he can do and showing good signs of being a guy who's a rotational guy, now that spot isn't available. He's like your backup three. And you got Malik Monk there at the two. I don't know what happens to Kevin Herter. I think, James, that would probably leave Jordan McLaughlin out on the outs because I think Malik would maybe come in there as the de facto backup point guard. I think Kevin would still get an opportunity. And now at this point with Trey Lyles and Alex Lynn, now you're at your 10-man rotation. And I don't know if Jordan McLaughlin will get the playing time. But do you feel like he's somebody that Mike Brown has in there? Is like, yeah, no, I want him to be part of the rotation. Talking about Jordan McLaughlin.
Yeah, I mean, I think in theory, yeah, but the fact is he hasn't played, and that's really tough.
Mhm,
And again, Kevin hasn't played and Trey Lyles hasn't played either. I would even say this though, the way that you're kind of like piecing all that together and like, I can see a world where Mike goes back to Trey Lyles as a small ball five, especially against smaller teams. Like, a
mhm,
lot of teams don't play a natural center, backup center anymore. And that's kind of what Alex Lynn has run up against, that there are
mhm,
certain games where he's not going to play, or at least he won't play in the first half while they're trying to do something different. I could see Trey at a small ball five. I could see him with McDaniel and Herter as the 3, 4, 5 off the bench. And the reason I think of that is because if you're going to play Herter at the three and he might be a little out of position there, I kind of want to have a long athletic defender with him.
mhm,
And so if you can piece it together where, maybe it is McLaughlin and maybe it's with Malik Monk. Um, I mean, we're talking about like a 5-man like hockey swap,
mhm,
and that's not going to be the case very often. Like this team is the last couple of years, they always wanted either De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis on the court.
mhm,
Now they've got 3 of those guys. So you want 2 of DeMar DeRozan, De'Aaron Fox, or Domantas Sabonis on the court at all times,
mhm,
and it makes it easier for that to happen. But then, Keegan Murray's played himself into a situation where you want him on the court as much as possible too. There just aren't a lot of minutes. If players are healthy, there's just not a lot of minutes outside of like the core 6, 7 guys.
yeah. No, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. We got James Ham of the Kings Beat of the Insiders here on D'Lo and KC as the Kings are back home. Kings season isn't underway because Kyle says basketball isn't back yet, right? Like basketball is not back. So
You can say whatever you want, Casey. It's your world. We're just living in it.
The Kings are playing at the Golden One Center tonight. I can't say that for sure. Going up against the Warriors. Check them out on ESPN. We're going to come back. I want to talk with James about more of this Kings team, but man, James, the guy knows everything about the Sacramento Kings and the history of the Sacramento Kings, and they're about to kick off their 40th season in Sacramento. Crazy. It feels like they just had the 30th anniversary. All of a sudden, here we are at the 40th anniversary. So we'll go down memory lane a little bit and also get you ready for this game tonight at the Golden One Center, man. It's D'Lo and KC. Just KC right now. My main man, James Ham, rocking with me. It's ESPN 1320, Sacramento's #1 sports station. Let me get something to drink real quick.
What's going on, everybody? You guys being nice in there? Come on, Michigan. Let's not be mean to Stephen Brown. What's happening? I know. Hey, I know a lot of people are like super high on Cam Johnson. Like, I mean, I sort of get it, but again, the idea of Cam Johnson is much like grander than the reality of Cam Johnson. Like, maybe it works, but he really is kind of a 3-point specialist at the 3-4. He's not super athletic. I mean, he's athletic, more athletic than Herter, but I think Herter's a craftier player. And Herter, outside of the shoulder injury, Herter's been a lot more healthy throughout his career. I don't know. Jordan, is this roster set or will there still be a trade? Well, I mean, it's set for today. By the trade deadline, I think there's a possibility that they could still be active. That's funny. Yes, Russ Dog, I'm going to the Kings game. I don't miss Kings games. But I am at home, and it's a 7:30 start. So I was able to come home, take a nap, and I'll drive back down. It takes me at this time of day, it'll probably take me an hour and 5 minutes to get to a game, which isn't that bad. I should be able to make it down plenty of time. Jordan out there causing trouble. Yeah, I mean, I don't like if you're a high level team, you're always looking to get better. And maybe this team just finds like a really good flow with the group of players that they have, and they don't make a move at the deadline. They are kind of constricted. Like we got into this with Rory earlier, where he made the claim that the Kings intentionally, hard cap themselves so they can't go out and do anything else. And I thought
Did Rory
was
get blocked or he just got ignored?
I don't know if he got blocked or what. I do know he started getting a little wild. I don't know. There's no reason to call me a liar or call Kyle a liar or whatever you're doing out there. But yeah, it got a little weird. But either way, the Kings have like a very small window of money to play with. They don't have a ton of cash, but that doesn't mean that they can't trade one guy and free up space so then they can do something like go out and trade their mid-level exception, trade a player into the mid-level. But as of right now, they only have like 6 million, 5 million, 6 million before they hit the first apron, and that first apron they're hard capped at. Yeah, Rory is in the Philippines, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. There are times where he and I go at it because he gets very, very literal about everything that I say and wants to break it down that way. And I understand that, but there are nuances to like almost everything in the salary cap.
Yeah, just enjoy the show.
Yeah. Yeah, Scooter, I did sort of get a little deep in the salary cap there. Sometimes I need to pull out the whiteboard for that and like spell it all out.
I just be asking them the same question over and over again. I just talked about this last week, and he was like, "I know, I lost you along the way."
Michigan, I'm a medium rare guy.
Looks like we got, I think if I'm reading that right, about 17 seconds left.
I'm back. I was gone there for a while.
Oh no, yeah, it's been hit or miss. It's been hit or miss. It's been a little spotty here today. A little spotty.
Yeah, sorry about that. These hits from home at between 3 and 4, it's when all the kids get home from school. So they're bogging the internet in the neighborhood. I have a corgi who's busted loose. What's going on?
D'Lo and KC here on ESPN 1320 as we wind down the day. Talking to my main man, James Ham here of the Insiders of the Kings Beat. And we've been talking about the theme today has just been like the Kings are back. The Kings are back home. You know, city is really excited about everything that's going on. But this is also the start of the 40th season in Sacramento. 40 seasons. James, I was talking about how I'm born and raised in Sacramento. I don't know a Sacramento without the Kings. I can't imagine what this city would look like without the Sacramento Kings. And it's been a long road. Like we've heard the story. You did a documentary on it, but the twists and turns of this team's tenure here in Sacramento. It seems like for one of the, not the only time, but for one of the few times in the 40 years, they seem like really settled as a franchise. And I don't mean that as far as like wins and losses, but just we're here. This is our arena. This is the owner. We're just settled and we're just operating. It seems like in the last this time right now, this is one of the few times that's been the case in their 40-year history.
Yeah, I totally agree. They moved here before the 85-86 season. They played in Arco 1 for the first two, I think, first 3 years. They opened Arco 2 in 1988, and then it was just like a whirlwind. I think the team was originally sold in 94 to Jim Thomas. Jim Thomas like considered relocating the team to Nashville, and they demanded like 70 million from the city, a loan for 70 million to help renovate the stadium, even though it was only at that point like what is it, like 8 years old or something. Then they sell to the Maloofs before the 98-99 season. So you're right, Kenny. Like once the Maloofs bought the team, it was nothing but measures Q&R and the convergence plan and trying to get something else built. And this is the first time that I feel like for, I don't know, what are we going on? This is year 7, year 8
I
of
think
Golden
it's
One Center.
yeah.
It feels like this team does have their ownerships, like solidified. They do have the arena is amazing and they're not going anywhere. There's no drama, there's no chaos. It's just about basketball and the team is solid. We hope that they're good. But the team is well built and ownership has been here for 10 years now. This is year 11 or year 12 for Vivek. I think his 2013-14 season's first year.
Dang, that's
Yeah.
crazy it's that long. I don't feel like it's been that long, but he going on 15 years running
Yeah.
this team.
I know this is my 15th year covering the team, which is crazy because that means that the first 25 years, but like I've been around for the next 15. And it's totally bizarre to like think of it that way that, when I started this, my oldest was like, I want to say he was 6 and my youngest was 2, and now
Wow,
one's 21 and one's 17.
wow.
And yeah, it just like goes by super fast. But I think we should sit back and enjoy this season. I hope that year 40 is a good one in Sacramento. I hope that um, there's an upward ascension because fan base deserves it. And they have put in the time and the money to like make this thing right this season. And so year 40, it's a big one. And I'm excited to get the pin that they give out on opening night every year. But at the same time, like it's been a battle, and it's good to see some continuity of ownership, continuity of franchise, continuity of coaching and players. It's a good thing.
Yeah. And this team that you talk about, like hoping that, they're on the upward trend or whatever, this feels like it's not the only time. But I would say maybe a handful of times in that 40 year, there's a certain level of expectation from the fan base. It's not just, oh, just go out there and play hard and, we'll cheer for you. Like these fans this year, they're expecting, playoff success, not only making the playoffs, but playoff success. And that type of expectation doesn't happen often in this city with this franchise. I mean, I'm sure it probably happened 2 or 3 years, during the early 2000s. Maybe after the 96 season, they expected something, maybe.
Yeah, I would say the
Maybe
94
after
95 season is
mm,
the year that they missed the playoffs on the final day of the season, right?
mm,
What did they lose to Denver? I think
Denver,
that's what
yeah.
happened. And then
Denver
Denver goes
beat
on to
got beat up, against
yeah,
them.
right. And then the next season they have the same exact record. I think they're 31 and 43. And they end up making the playoffs with Gary St. Jean.
Mm,
And that's when you like felt like something good was happening, and then it went away super quick.
so
Like Brian Grant decided to leave, and like like everything fell apart super quick. And that's really like up until the couple of years leading up to the pandemic when things got a little lean here. That's really the only time when there was like major disappearing of fans for years. So I do remember a world, Kenny, where there was no Kings in Sacramento. I'm old enough to remember that world. It wasn't cool. Most people here were Lakers fans because the Lakers were the best team, and
yeah,
it was the Lakers and Celtics. But um, like there was a world without it. But I think the cool thing is now we've got a 40-year window where it's been Gary Gerald calling every single game and just being such a beacon of everything in Sacramento. And it's a miracle that not only have we been blessed with having, Kings basketball for 40 years, but we've been blessed with having one of the best radio voices there ever was for
mm.
40 years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things when you get 40 years in, like I know a lot of people will say, oh, they came from Kansas City and they were, Rochester and, and all this other stuff, and Cincinnati, and they got all these different origins. When you're in one place for 40 years, not saying you get rid of your lineage that way, but this is the Sacramento Kings. Like this is Sacramento's franchise at this point. And it's one of those things where, like I said, I was born before the Kings were in Sacramento, but I don't remember anything. I might have been 1.5, maybe 2 years old. And it's not like you were a grown man, drawn James Ham, but I just what did people do out here before the Kings? What did they do? And who did they follow? Did they follow sports? Like what did they do? I guess maybe was it college? I don't know. What did people do before the Kings?
No, this has always been a huge baseball town, and that's why I think baseball is going to do tremendous here next season when the A's, drop in. This is a huge, huge baseball town, and people forget like there's half of a stadium built in the on the Arco property for a
Mm,
baseball stadium. Like there's the whole lower bowl of a baseball stadium built. They thought they were They made a push for the A's in the early 90s. They made a push for the Raiders and almost had the Raiders. And at the last second, Al Davis asked for a controlling interest of the Kings. So they backed out of the deal and said, no, we're not doing that. So like this has been a region that's missed out just by a hair, like so many times. And when the Kings moved here, like, look, I was like growing up, the PA announcer was Fred Anderson, who, of course, Scott Moak has been the PA announcer for a long time. And Fred was a deacon at my church in Grass Valley. He also called Nevada Union football games for years and years. So I was kind of like raised with someone I knew that was there. And I remember my dad taking me to my first game. We walked down, we said hi to Fred. I graduated high school with his daughter. We're still friends. And, those are the memories that I have early on. It's, Gary Gerald, it's Jerry Reynolds as a coach, Jerry Reynolds as a GM, the chaos of Ricky Berry, the Bobby Hurley accident. Like those are the things that like I grew up on as part of like your fandom. And, we're waiting for that moment where only good things happen to the Kings. And they had that window for 8 years where a lot of good things happened for the Kings, but I think we're ready for another window like that.
Yeah, I think so too, man. And just talking to you and thinking about it, like it's crazy. This really is the only time where it's just been settled. It's just been. I mentioned it just a second ago, but it's just been. You have ownership. You have an arena. There's always been, and you're not going anywhere, right?
Hmm.
So like it's always been one of those three components circling around the franchise. Like, oh, you got a new owner. Okay, we got a new owner. Oh, you got to get a new arena. Well, if you don't get a new arena, then they might leave. And yeah, Joe Davison was talking about it earlier. Kings aren't going anywhere. Golden One Center is here until my kids are my age at the very least. It's here for a long time, and that means the Kings are here for a long time.
Yeah, I don't think they're going anywhere, and I think we're going to start hearing some more news about some acquisitions of properties around the arena that are taking place right now. From what I've heard, the potential for more 4 and 5 star hotels around the arena, which would go sort of play into the idea of a baseball stadium going across the way as well, whether it's in West Sac or it's somewhere else in Sacramento.
Mhm.
That I think that we're on the cusp of something. And, like, I'll say this, like, I, as far as like reporters and like, I've been on as hard on Vivek Ranadive as anyone, just like throughout my career. Like there are moments that we've had with him that, like, as an owner, like he's made some missteps.
Mhm.
But if you step back and you take your kids to a game and you get out of the parking garage and you walk up to that arena and you see all that's been built up around it, you see, the Sawyer Hotel and that whole courtyard. And if you can remember back to what that area looked like when it was the downtown plaza, which I helped build, like I many, many years ago, I was an apprentice on the downtown plaza build. Like if you look at what it looks like now versus what it was before and how much he and his group of owners and that ownership group has done to rebuild that area, it's just remarkable. And the fact that a Major League Baseball team is going to park itself in West Sac for 3 years, and that's Vivek.
Yeah.
And we can, you don't want to get all into the mud as to what's happening there with the A's and everything else, but like, look, there's something to like delivering.
Mhm.
And, especially after dealing with the Maloofs for all those years, who would never deliver anything.
Mhm.
There's something to, even the way that Oakland is losing their last professional team. And again, you can look at bad ownership that is just like absconding with a team, but like that's not what you have here in Sacramento. You've had an owner who saved it to help save a team. You have a owner who's trying to build up more of the city, who's trying to bring Major League Baseball here. And so there's so many positives here when it comes to what's happening with the team and what's happening with downtown Sacramento and how they're trying to continue to make this into a big time major league city.
Yeah, I mean, James, you know as well as anyone, being downtown, working at Copeland's, all this. I, I couldn't imagine what is there today. I couldn't imagine the way, all the way from, really, you can stretch it down to Old Sac, because Old Sac has something, the Ferris wheel and all this other stuff. Like, I went to Old Sac one night on a random Friday. There were so many people out there, like families, like, hey, let's hang out. Like, from Old Sac all the way to the convention center, I couldn't imagine what it looking like it does right now. 25 years ago, it was desolate. It was all bad. It was no place you wanted to be. And just living through that right now. I mean, it's amazing to see in Vivek, and the people who, own the different buildings around there. They got so much to do with that. And like you just mentioned, they're not finished, it doesn't seem like.
No. No, and that's the thing, like, you have to see the vision, and not only that, but what's been realized. I mean, that's the amazing thing. Like, what was there and what's there now? I mean, it's one thing to talk about building, a $12 billion stadium complex in the on the Oakland at Howard Terminal. It's one thing to talk about that stuff. It's a whole other thing for someone literally to rip up the heart of downtown, which was dying, and put in a brand new heart.
Mm,
They transplanted a brand new heart into the downtown Sacramento, and it's helped, like, even with the pandemic, it's helped
yeah,
that area thrive. And
yeah,
just think, if there wasn't a pandemic, what
yeah,
that area would look like now if it wasn't for the fact that we shut down that whole entire area for 2 or 2.5 years.
right,
Just really, really remarkable what's been accomplished here. And that's where, when we talk about 40 years in Sacramento, I think that's the biggest thing, is like, they're going to be here. You have everything moving the right direction. They're still trying to expand and build and do better and do more things downtown, to help, build this thing out. And I mean, I saw today, I was surprised, the Kings franchise is listed at 3.3 billion.
Gee, he bought it for what, 550 million?
11 years ago, he bought it for a valuation of 535 million. And of that, they didn't even get all that money because they had debt, they had all kinds of things that
Oh
went.
man.
But like, that's what the valuation of the Kings were. And it's not just because all teams have gone up in the NBA. It's because he built a just monstrous complex downtown Sacramento,
Yeah,
and really gave the franchise something to build on,
yeah,
and stability. So yeah, really, really cool stuff.
yeah. Nah, and you mentioned it, and the heart of it all is the Sacramento Kings. And like we've been saying
Mhm.
all day long, they're back in town tonight. We talked about DeMar DeRozan. We talked about Jaylen McDaniels. Is there anything else that you're kind of looking forward to? I wish Devin Carter was playing. It's always fun to watch the rookies, in their first shot at some NBA action. So we're gonna have to wait for that. Last year, we saw Kobe Jones, and we were kind of impressed by some of the things he was doing. Is there anything else outside of, obviously DeMar, that you're looking for and watching in this game tonight?
Yeah, I want to see the functionality of the starting group with Keon Ellis. That's something that I really want to see. I want to make sure, like, what we see from Malik is he's 100%, and that his knee's right, because they did sit him the entire summer, and he's working his way back. So I want to see that.
Real quick, James. On that, I don't want to lose that point. Has he said anything about, I'm still trying to get my groove back, or like, has he said anything about his status coming into training camp?
No, no, but Mike has. Mike's talked about how, like, it took a couple of, like, the first practice or two for him to burn off some of the rust because he hadn't played. He hadn't been cleared really to do on court stuff throughout the summer. So there's that, right? And then on top, like, I want to see a couple of these young guys. I want to see, can Mason Jones make a push for the final roster spot? Can Scalabiciere
Mm,
make a run? Can someone like Isaac Jones make an impression? We keep hearing about what he's doing at practice. What does it look like when you're up against, pros that aren't your friends, that aren't on your team? What does it look like when that happens? And so
mhm,
there are certain players that I want to see. Is Terry Taylor a ball player? Can he make this roster? There are all of these, like, little elements that you're kind of just intrigued to see what they look like in functionality. And I think we're going to see the starters in the first half, the starters and the sort of the rotation, the 8 or 9 guys, right? And then in the second half, I think it's going to be a lot of the young guys going out there and showing what they've got. And I think the one thing I love about Mike Brown is that if you get an opportunity with him and you play the right way and you play hard and you show that you belong,
Mhm.
he's willing to give you another opportunity. And that's how Keon Ellis worked his way into this lineup. And if I'm, these guys that are from like 13 to 21 on the roster, I'm looking at that as like my way into this team. If I go out there and it's just not like play like your hair's on fire or push somebody around or go score a bunch of points, show that you're a bucket. That's not what it's about. Go out there and play the right way, play with the right passion, the right intensity. Mike will give you another opportunity to show that that's who you are. And that's something that, again, Keon Ellis took full advantage of that. If it wasn't for a couple of bad blowouts early in last season, we might not see Keon Ellis. But
Yeah.
when you show Mike that that's who you are, that you're going to follow the basic tenets of who they want you to be as a player, he usually rewards that. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see what happens.
And you know what? He'll reward that, and it doesn't always have to happen right away. Like I think of a guy specifically like Boogie Ellis. I feel like he's a Mike Brown type player, and
Hmm.
I think he's going to show that in the preseason. And that may not lead to him being on the team this year. They may look at him and like, no, let's get him down to Stockton. Let's develop him, and he may be somebody that they take a year. It's kind of like they did with Keon Ellis to bring up and have in their program. But those things can happen starting like right now.
No, I totally agree. And, for all the times that we talk about like the past and like, we mentioned the 85, I mean, the 95, 96 season, right? For as
Mhm.
much as Brian Grant was so fun, right? So it was so amazing. And it was like, oh my gosh, look, the Kings have this crazy young power forward that looks like young Karl Malone. I think people remember back to that time that the other guy was Michael the Animal Smith.
Yeah,
And that's what you're looking for. Like somebody go out there as a second round pick or an undrafted player, go out there and just make it so they don't have another choice
yeah,
but to play you.
yeah.
And there's potential for that. So I'm excited to see it.
No doubt, no doubt. James Ham, he's going to be in the building. We're all going to be watching 7:30 tonight, ESPN. Check out the Kings back in action. DeMar DeRozan makes his debut. Always does.